slaving over the conferences is finally done. Most people are now just checking out more of the products on a more hands-on level, just seeing how things work and seeing how or whether or not it will actually turn out good, or there's still some development to be done. But most of E3 is over and said with right now. Like I said, most people are just testing the things at the booths, but the conferences themselves are mostly over. Now, on the last note, I just wanted to talk very briefly about the PC gaming show. Me being someone who only uses a PC for most of my things in life, I was actually quite happy that they dedicated a specific show for PC gamers, PC enthusiasts, PC software designers, and people who are interested in the hardware of computers, personal computers, whether they be high-end, low-end. I guess maybe as the future goes on, they'll talk more about the Mac OS, they'll talk more about Linux, hopefully, I hope. As Windows isn't really the only option, people need to realize that fair and fine, Windows has dominated the market for quite some time. It's not the only option, and all other options are potentially equally as viable. I've seen a lot of people enjoying, well, there is millions and millions of people enjoying Apple and the Mac OS and all other things Apple, and I'm sure as hell they've been also, I've seen and experienced, and even myself in my studies, seen a lot of people who do a lot of extensive and great work with Linux. So it's quite some interesting things that were happening in the PC game show. Lots of games developers came to talk about different things, whether it be cross-platform play with Windows 10 and other consoles, whether it was the whole Steam Greenlight debacle, how that works. They were talking about Steam Early Access games and how this is the sort of new way of running demos on computers for people to have a sort of hands-on appeal. Kind of makes sense in some degrees. You know, I'm not a big early access fan. I'm not really a big Kickstarter fan, but however you want to see it, it's your choice. These are systems that exist within our world. You just choose whether to live with them or not. But we can't act like they don't exist. On the games, they were finally talking about some content for Killing Floor 2. I guess Killing Floor 2 players can be excited about that, all said and fine. But it was funny though how some of the developers of most of these games, and some of which even started on early access or beta type runs, were saying that most of the games they designed, whether they started off as mods or as little demos, they never actually thought that they'll be as big as they were. They even had the head designer, the man who the man who started DayZ, and he was saying that really it was only just a mod that, you know, he had made, and he was like, you know, maybe a couple of people will enjoy this, and DayZ blew up. And he said that he didn't plan for it to go for as long as it did, hence why he ended up leaving DayZ after some time. He just couldn't continue developing more stuff for it because he never planned it to last for so many years and have so many thousands or maybe even millions of people playing the game. The difficulties that come within games development by the developers themselves, some of these things were highlighted throughout the show. I'd advise you to watch and see what it has to offer you. But also they actually looked at it from a hardware point of view. Most people think that games design, the final product, is all hinged on the developers of the game, the software developers, the programmers, and the studios that make these games with their music and artwork and everything. It's all hinged on the studios, and then the publisher publishes it. Fair and fine, that's partly true, but that's not actually the entire thing. You have to understand that they had the chief gaming scientist of AMD coming in to talk about how it's not only just that. We're looking at games because it's the PC game show, but this applies to most other softwares and technologies that exist in this day and age. They talked about how in his post he has to go over, for example, to different gaming studios to tell them about the new architecture of the, for example, AMD GPUs or the AMD APUs or different AMD CPUs and motherboards. and he has to explain the architecture, what new things they've implemented, what old things they've removed, what old things have stayed the same, and all these things have to be clear for the developers to understand, such that they are able to code and program for these said platforms so that they can run whatever software they're going to develop for the platform. Same goes with different companies, whether it be AMD, Intel, Nvidia, or other proprietary companies. They all have to go to different developers and explain their architecture to them, and clarity and making people understand is very key, because these are very complex systems and they must be able to package their architecture in such a way that it is very not user friendly, but it's very understandable and can be worked with by others, because the more difficult it is, potentially the less people will want to partner up with you. And it's quite interesting. And now they're managing to pack in with the new AMD R9 Nano series of graphics cards. They're packing in decent, not high-end, but decent power graphics cards in a very small form factor of up to 6 inches in length, which is freaking amazing. As a person who travels quite a bit, every time I have to pack up my desktop PC and dismantle it, it's quite a hassle, because the components are just so big and it's just so cumbersome to carry long distances. It's really difficult, and I always felt that the steps they should be taking for technology at the current moment is finding ways to compress data size and finding ways to compress actual hardware size. I feel that those are two things that are very important that must be invested into, and of course power management and making the most out of little power. These three things personally for me are very important, and AMD seems to be talking about or tackling such things. They have the AMD R9 Fury, which will be the new high-end card that they'll be coming up with, and they actually announced a new architecture which will actually be a dual GPU graphics card. There'll be 2 GPU cores on one die. That's not new per se, considering the fact that we've had different motherboard companies. I remember there was once a Skull something brand motherboard that appeared back in like 2007, showing the potential of dual CPU motherboard configurations. It didn't become so popular because it wasn't really necessary. It was too much at the time. Not too much as in for every task, but for people who were gaming, having 2 CPUs on one motherboard was unnecessary in most cases, and most softwares didn't even support multiple CPUs at the time, let alone not even that. How can I say this? Most softwares and games, for example, didn't even support multi-threading at the time, let alone multiple CPUs. So that's another problem when it comes to developing new hardware. Will software that's currently there even support the hardware that you're setting into place? If not, then you're just wasting time and money, and it won't be adopted as fast. So in this case then, with the dual GPU core graphics cards, of course the main concern is that the cards have to perform. If one card with one core moves at a certain speed or processes at a certain speed, then that means one with 2 cores has to increase this performance and not cost too much money and not use too much power and not produce too much heat. And you can already see the list of problems is just increasing because of the increase in technology within a card. But the reason why I find this very good is because with DirectX 12 they said that you'll be able to SLI/Crossfire graphics cards of different manufacturers. So you can have an Nvidia card in Crossfire with the AMD card, or an AMD card in SLI with the Nvidia card in multiple different configurations. This wasn't done before due to different problems with Nvidia and Intel. Nvidia and AMD working together, of course, because they're rivals. It's all about the money these days, and always really. That's just how it was. So now in this case then, when you're able to take a high-end dual GPU graphics card from AMD and then you partner partner it up with probably a single core beast such as the Nvidia Titan X, for example, you could make magic happen with such card configurations, whether it just comes to gaming and other things. Just to tie things up, think about it like this. You get a dual CPU motherboard, you get 2 Intel Xeons with what, 8 cores each, for example. So that's 16 cores worth of power and 16 threads, or even more than that, 32 threads. You can set up about maybe 36 gigs of RAM onwards, 36 gigs being the minimum for such a large setup. And then you could potentially have, if they were to remake, for example, this is going back into the days of my high school, if they were to unleash a new Nvidia Quadro, and then you SLI that with a dual GPU and AMD graphics card, now you'll have about 6 cores of graphical power and 16 cores of computational power and 36 gigs of RAM. You can already see how just only home computers are already reaching levels of server standard, let alone what they're going to do with actual servers. This scares me, because that's a lot of power. Because don't get me wrong, no matter how powerful a desktop computer can be, it will be fractions of what a server can perform. And if they're taking such large steps for desktop computing, potentially increasing the power tenfold, servers will blow up. There's going to be a large leap in terms of server quality technology, and we're still yet to see more, I guess, as time goes on. But just to sign off, there was information about Killing Floor. I guess you could look more on that. They showed some Deus Ex Mankind Divided, augmented people being oppressed, revolution, civil war, looking amazing.